hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad. Well, thank you for coming on back here. Last Thursday, we had a short break because I was going on a little trip, which I'll tell you all about some other time. But let me just say that I wouldn't want to trade places with anybody right now, and I'm quite happy. Unlike our dear friend Patroclus and his Greek compatriots. Yes, because at the end of last episode for Book 16, Sweet 16, most ironically named, Patroclus, the dear friend and lover of Achilles, was slain. Fix that mic. Was slain by Hector. Now, as we remember, also Apollo was helping out with that. He cheated a little bit. He dashed the armor from Patroclus's body, and he was left there naked to be stabbed in the back by Euphorbus, a young guy. Stabby stab, and then Hector finished him off. But not before they both got a few fine words in there. Now this week I'm drinking from a special mug by Campbell Pottery, which is a little flat on that side, which is kind of cool. And so I hope you all have something to drink. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I'm gonna check into the chat. Looks like everything's going well for us. In these summer days, I might be just to forewarn you all, there might be a big change to this show. Yes, there might be an episode coming up where I am no longer wearing this jacket. So I hope to brace you all for that huge change, which I'm sure you all derive comfort from, but, you know, things being what they are. Okay, so everything seems to be going well, technically and all that, so I guess it's time for us to get on with Iliad Book 17 for episode 17. When Menelaus saw Patroclus go down, he shouldered his way through the heroes in front and stood over the body, the way a lowing heifer stands over the first calf she has given birth to. Red-haired Menelaus above Patroclus, with his spear out and shield over him, determined to kill anyone who approached. Panthus' son Euphorbus was still interested in the fallen Patroclus. He came up and planted himself close to Menelaus and said, "Back off, son of Atreus. Leave the corpse and forget the blood-soaked spoils. No Trojan or Trojan ally hit Patroclus before I did in the heat of battle. So let me have the glory that is mine, if you value your sweet life." This was too much for Menelaus, who said, "It's not good to boast beyond your strength, Euphorbus. Leopards and lions and razorback boars, the wildest of beasts, may be nothing compared to Panthus' sons. But mighty Hyperenor did not live to enjoy his youth when he made light of me as the weakest warrior in all of Greece. He's not going home under his own power to gladden his wife and devoted parents. I'll unstring you too if you stand against me. Take my advice and get back to your troops before you get hurt. Fools learn the hard way." Euphorbus was not convinced. He answered, "Now, Menelaus, you're going to pay the price for killing my brother and boasting about it, and for widowing his young bride and causing our parents unspeakable pain. But I could relieve their suffering for a while by bringing back your head and armor, and placing them in Panthus and Frontis' hands. But it won't take long to settle this. Either put up a fight or clear out of here." His ash spear hit the disc of Menelaus' shield, but the point bent and didn't break through the heavy bronze. Menelaus charged with a prayer to Zeus, and as Euphorbus stepped back, put his spear through the base of his neck, leaning into the thrust with a strong grip on the shaft. The point passed right through his soft neck, and he fell heavily with a clatter of armor. His hair, braided like twisted myrtle, with gold and silver, was drenched with blood. A man has been rearing an olive sapling in a lonely place, where it has enough water. It is beautiful and growing well, quivering in the breeze, its white buds blossoming. One day, a storm comes with violent winds, tears it from its trench, and leaves it on the ground. So too Panther's son, Euphorbus. Menelaus moved in to strip off the armor. A mountain lion, supremely confident, has seized the finest heifer in the grazing herd. First he crunches her neck in his strong jaws, then greedily laps her blood and soft innards. The herdsmen and their hounds shout at him from a safe distance, but, pale with fear, they lack the will to take him on. Not a single Trojan opposed Menelaus, and he would have carried off Euphorbus' armor easily, had not Apollo begrudged it. Taking the form of Mentes, a Ciconian commander, he went to work on Hector, and his words flew fast. "Hector, you're chasing something you'll never catch, the horses of Peleus, a team hard to handle for any mortal except Achilles, a goddess' son. Meanwhile, Atreus' son, Menelaus, has gotten in position over Patroclus and killed the best man we've got, Euphorbus. Panther's son, stopped him cold." And the god went back into the toil of men. A dark shadow of grief passed over Hector. He scanned the lines and saw one figure bending over another, stripping off armor, the other beneath him in a pool of blood. He strode forward through the men in front, his armor blazing, and the cry from his lips was like Hephaestus' inextinguishable flame. Atreus' son heard it and said to himself, "Ah me, if I leave behind the fine armor and Patroclus too, who fought for my honor, all of the Greeks will hold it against me. But if I fight Hector and the Trojans alone, out of a sense of shame, I'll be surrounded, one against many. Hector is leading the whole Trojan army in this direction. But why am I talking to myself this way? There's nothing but trouble in bucking heaven and fighting a man with a god on his side. No Greek looking on will hold it against me if I pull back from Hector, who has divine help. But if I could just find Ajax, the two of us could get back in and think about fighting, even against heaven's will. Make the best of a bad situation and see if we can save Patroclus' corpse for the son of Peleus." While he thought it over, the Trojan ranks closed in behind Hector. Menelaus pulled back, leaving the corpse and constantly turning around, like a bearded lion that men with dogs drive from a pen with spears and shouts. His heart is like ice, and he leaves reluctantly. Red-haired Menelaus left Patroclus, but when he reached his own lines, he looked around for Telamonian Ajax, and spotted him on the army's left flank, cheering on his men and urging them to fight, for Phoebus Apollo had panicked them. Menelaus ran over and said to him, "Ajax, old friend, Patroclus is dead. We'll have to hurry if we're going to get his body back to Achilles, that is, the naked corpse. Hector has the armor." Ajax was moved when he heard this. He strode to the front, Menelaus at his side. Hector had stripped the armor from Patroclus' body and was pulling at the corpse. He meant to sever the head and feed the trunk to the dogs of Troy, when Ajax stood before him like a city wall. Hector gave ground and vaulted into his chariot, handing the exquisite gear to some Trojans to take back to town, when he could glory in it. Ajax covered Menocia's son with his shield. A lioness stands over her cubs. She has been leading the little ones through the forest when hunters came across her, and now, savoring her strength, she narrows her eyes to cold yellow slits. Ajax stood over the fallen hero, and Menelaus came up beside him, nursing his grief. Then Glaucus, the Lycian captain, glared at Hector and said angrily, "You're all good looks, Hector, and no fight! Just another big name attached to a quitter! Well, you'd better think now how to save your city with homegrown Trojans and nobody else. No Lycians, at least, are going to fight the Greeks to rescue Troy, since there's no gratitude for non-stop combat with the enemy forces. Are you likely to save an ordinary soldier in the press of battle when you left Sarpedon, your comrade and guest, as pickings for the Greeks? After all he'd done for you and your city while he was still alive, you didn't have the heart to keep the dogs off his head. That's why now, if any of the Lycians will listen to me, we're heading home. Then Troy will be done for, if only the Trojans showed the sort of courage real men have when they fight for their country against foreign invaders. Laying it all on the line, we would drag Patroclus to Troy in no time. And if we did, if we got that man's corpse out of battle and into Priam's great city, the Greeks would give back Sarpedon's armor, and we could bring his body into Ilion. That's how great a man the dead Patroclus served, the best of the Achaeans and his soldiers too. But you didn't have the guts to stand up to Ajax and look him in the eye just now, much less fight him, the reason being that he's stronger than you. Hector, helmet shimmering, responded, Glaucus, this insolence is not like you at all. I've always thought you were the most intelligent of all the Lycians, but I have no use for nonsense like this. What a thing to say, that I wouldn't take on big hulking Ajax. I don't rattle, Glaucus, or freeze up in combat. Sure, Zeus can overpower the greatest hero, make him panic, and rob him of victory, just as he can make men get up and fight. So come along if you want to see how I do all day long, whether I'm the coward you say I am, or stop a Greek or two cold, for all their fury, from fighting in defense of Patroclus' corpse. Then Hector made his voice carry, Trojan, Lycian, and Dardanian soldiers, be men, my friends, and remember your strength while I put on Achilles' resplendent armor that I took off Patroclus when I cut him down. And his helmet flashed gold as he turned and ran out of the battle. He soon caught his comrades. They were not far, and he was running hard as they carried Achilles' gear back to Troy. There, on the edge of war's horrors, he changed armor. He gave his own to be carried back to the city by his fighting men, and he put on the inhuman gear of Peleus' son Achilles that the gods of heaven had given to his father, and he to his son, when he had grown old in them, as his son would not. Zeus saw him from his seat high in the clouds as he buckled on Achilles' armor. Shaking his head, the god said to himself, Unhappy man, you have no thought of death, yet death is close. You are putting on the immortal armor of a man who makes you and many others tremble. You killed his comrade, gentle and strong. And you violated the order of things when you took the armor from his shoulders and head. Yet I will grant you strength in recompense for this. Andromache will never welcome you home wearing the glorious armor of Achilles. And the son of Kronos nodded, his brows darkening the air. He made the armor fit Hector like his own skin, and Ares in all his dread power entered into him, packing every muscle in his body with strength. Hector returned to the field with a great shout and went among his allied forces, a gleaming image in Achilles' armor. He encouraged them all, singling them out, speaking to Mesthlius, and Glaucus, and Medon, Thersilochus, Asteropaeus, and Dicenor, Hippothus, Phorcys, and Chromius, and to Ennomus, who read the flight of birds, giving them heart with these soaring words, Hear me, my valiant allies and neighbors. I did not invite you to come here from your cities because I was looking for or needed a crowd, but because I thought you would fight with willing hearts to save the Trojan women and children from these warmongering Greeks. This is why I have been feeding you at our expense and giving you gifts to keep up your morale. So face the enemy and fight. Maybe you'll pull through, and maybe you won't. That's the charm of battle. Whoever gets Patroclus, mere corpse that he is, back to our lines, and makes Ajax give in, gets half the spoils. I'll split them with him right down the middle, and he'll have glory like mine. This inspired them to charge the Greeks en masse, spears held high, thinking they would surely pull the corpse from under Telamone and Ajax, the fools. Ajax killed many over that corpse, but finally turned to Menelaus and said, "Menelaus, old friend, I don't have much hope of us two getting out of this battle alive. I'm not only afraid that Patroclus' body is soon going to glut Trojan dogs and birds, but that you and I are going to get it in the neck. There's a cloud of war covering everything. Hector, with one thing clear, our sudden death. Call in our heroes, maybe someone's within earshot." And Menelaus, who had a good battle cry, split the air with a shout to the Greeks. "Argive leaders, everyone who drinks at Agamemnon's table, commands a troop, and has honor and glory from Zeus. I can't make out every single captain in this battle's firestorm, but get out here on your own, out of shame that Patroclus is becoming a ragbone for Trojan dogs." The Ajax that was Oileus' swift son heard him clearly and was the first man out. Sprinting behind him were Idomeneus and his comrade Meriones, a real killer. As for the rest, who could remember all the Greeks who swarmed into battle? Bunched behind Hector, the Trojans struck. A great wave sometimes rolls into the mouth of a swollen river, pushing against its current. The headlands resound as the sea roars to get in. The Trojans came on, but the Greeks stood firm around Menoetius' son, their hearts united, their bronze shields locked. And from above, Zeus poured over their dark gold helmets a profound mist, for Menoetius' son had been far from hateful when in life he was Achilles' companion. Now he loathed the thought of his enemy's dogs playing with his body, and so he roused his comrades to fight for him. At first the Trojans drove the wild-eyed Greeks back from the body, and although for all their efforts and high spirits they failed to land a spear on anyone, they started to pull the corpse away. The Greeks, however, were back soon, rallied by Ajax, who looked and acted more like a hero than any living Greek except peerless Achilles. Ajax split the Trojan front lines, as a wild boar in the mountains tosses dogs and men when he turns on them in a clearing. This was the son of Telamone, glorious Ajax, scattering the Trojan platoons that stood around Patroclus and wanted nothing else more than the glory of dragging him back to their city. Hippothous, a Pelasgian, had tied his war belt around the corpse's ankles and was hauling it inch by inch through the fierce fighting, much to the satisfaction of Hector and the Trojans. None of them could have stopped what happened next. Ajax's spear coming from nowhere and smashing through his plumed helmet. Hippothous' brains, clotted with blood, spurted out from the wound along the spear's socket. He dropped Patroclus' foot and then fell himself, face downward on the corpse, far from Larissa and his father Lethus, his debt to his parents unpaid, his life cut short by great Ajax's spear. Hector countered, but Ajax kept his eye on the bright flare his spear made and managed, although just barely, to dodge the bronze point. Hector's spear went on to kill Schedius, son of Iphitus, and the best of the Phocians, who ruled over many from his home in Panopeus. The bronze point passed through his collarbone and went straight through to the base of his shoulder. He fell with a heavy clanging of armor. Ajax then hit Phorcys, Phaenops' son, right in the belly as he straddled Hippothous. The spear point broke the corslet plate, and his guts oozed through the bronze. After he had fallen, his hand still clawed at the dust. The Trojan champions, including Hector, had enough. They backed off, and howling Greeks dragged off the dead, Phorcys and Hippothous, and got busy stripping off their armor. It would have been another defeat for the Trojans, driven by the Greeks, with Ares on their side, back to Ilion, and an Argive victory, power and glory beyond Zeus's allotment, had not Apollo himself aroused Aeneas, assuming the form of a herald, Periphas, son of Iphitos, a courteous man, who had grown old in Anchises' service. Apollo, a son of Zeus, spoke in his guise. "Aeneas, admittedly, you will never defend steep Ilion in defiance of a god, although indeed I have seen other men trust their prowess and strength, their courage and their superior numbers, and defend their people against all odds. But in our case, Zeus wants victory for us, not for the Greeks, and yet you hang back in fear." Aeneas knew it was the god Apollo. When he looked him in the face, he called to Hector, "Hector, Trojan leaders and allied commanders, shame on us all if you are beaten back to Ilion by the Achaeans without defending ourselves. One of the gods has just whispered in my ear that Zeus on high is on our side in this fight. Let's go straight at the Danaans. Don't let them take dead Patroclus to their ships at their leisure." With that, he bounded to the front of the fight and took his stand. The Trojans rallied and faced the Greeks. Then Aeneas thrust, getting his spear into Leocritus Arispes' son, and worthy comrade of Lycomedes. When his friend went down, Lycomedes felt for him, and standing right beside him, cast his bright spear and hit Apisaon, son of Hippasus, under the ribs in the liver. The man crumpled, the best warrior in deep-soiled Paeonia, after Astyopeus, who watched him fall, pitied him, then charged the Greeks with everything he had. But there was nothing he could do. The Greeks had formed around Patroclus a wall of shields, forward from which they held their spears. Ajax was everywhere among them, seeing to it that not a man took one step backward from the body, or went out in front to show off, but that all stood together and fought close in. That was how big Ajax managed it, and the earth grew wet with dark blood as the dead fell, thick and fast on both sides, Trojans, allies, Greeks too, who shed blood, but less of it, and with fewer casualties, because they fought in a tight group and protected each other. So the battle burned on, but you would have thought the sun had gone out, and the moon too, for they fought in dark air. All the heroes clustered around Menoetius' slain son. The rest of the Trojans and Greeks had their war under the open sky and in brilliant sunlight, not a cloud on the horizon. They took breaks from the fighting, avoiding each other's groaning shafts, making some open space in battle. But those in the center suffered the agony of combat in darkness with merciless bronze. All the best were there, except for two Greeks, Thrasymedes and Antilochus. They did not know blameless Patroclus was dead, and assumed he was still alive and fighting the Trojans in front. These two were struggling to keep their men alive and in combat, fighting off at some distance where Nestor had ordered them when they left the ships. The day was passing. Men hacked slowly at each other in pain, the sweat from their labor coating their thighs and knees, pooling under their feet, spattered from their arms into their glazed eyes, as the two armies fought over Achilles' surrogate. A tanner gives his men an ox hide to stretch. Having first drenched it in oil, they stand in a circle and pull at it until its moisture is squeezed out by all of their tugging, and the oil has a chance to penetrate the taut leather pores. So too the tight circle of men on either side, tugging at the corpse, the Trojans with high hopes of dragging it back to Ilion, the Greeks with their own hopes of getting it back to the ships. It was a savage fight, and not even Ares or Athena, in their most belligerent moods, could have watched it with disdain. Such was the labor for men and horses Zeus stretched over Patroclus that day. But all this time, Achilles did not know Patroclus was dead, for they were fighting far from the ships under Troy's walls, and Achilles never dreamed he would die there, but thought he would return alive after he reached the gates. Nor did he think Patroclus would take Troy without him, or with him, for that matter. He had heard this many times from his mother when they had their talks, and she would tell him the intentions of Zeus. But his mother did not tell him now of this great evil, his dearest friend dead. Around the corpse they kept pressing hard with sharp spears and killing each other. Some Greek would say from his bronze mask, "Friends, there's no point in returning to the hollow ships. It would be better for the black earth to swallow us here if we're going to let the Trojans haul him back to the city and win all the glory." Or some Trojan would say, "Friends, even if we're all fated to die by this body, don't take a step back." These words would lift everyone's strength. While they fought on, and as the iron noise rose through the barren air to the bronze sky, Achilles' horses, some distance from the battle, were weeping, and had been since they first learned that their charioteer had fallen in the dust under the hands of man-slaying Hector. Automedon, Diores' valiant son, was doing everything he could with the lash, gentle words, and curses to get them moving, but the pair would not go back to the ships by the level sea, or back into battle with the Achaeans. They stood still as stone, still as a post on a man's or woman's tomb, there in front of the beautiful chariot, their heads bowed to the earth, their tears rolling warm from their eyes to the ground as they wept in longing for their charioteer, and their lustrous manes were fouled in the dust as they streamed to either side of the yoke. When he saw them mourning, the son of Cronos felt pity. He shook his head and said to himself, "Ah, why did we give you to Lord Peleus, to a mortal, while you are deathless and ageless? Was it so you could share men's pain? Nothing is more miserable than man of all that breathes and moves upon earth. But Priam's son Hector will not drive you or your wrought chariot. That I will not allow. It is not enough that he has the armor and struts vainly in it. No, in your knees and in your heart I will put strength, so you may bear Automedon out of the war to the hollow ships. For I will continue to give the Trojans glory, to kill, until they reach the ships and the sun sets, and sacred darkness comes on." And he breathed into the horses great strength. The two shook the dust from their manes, and raced with the chariot through the combatants. Automedon kept trying to fight, though grieving for his comrade, swooping with the horses like a vulture on a flock of geese, easily leaving the clamor of the Trojans behind, and just as easily bearing down on them. But he could not kill any of his quarry, since he was alone in the haunted chariot, and could not handle a spear and drive too. Finally a friend saw him and caught his eye, Alcimedon, son of Larches Haemonides, who stood behind the chariot and said, "Automedon, which god has put this idea into your head and robbed you of your good sense, fighting the Trojans up here in the thick of things all alone? Your companion is dead, and Hector is strutting around in old Peleus' armor." Diores' son Automedon answered, "Alcimedon, is there a man in the army who could control these immortal horses besides Patroclus? He had a will like a god's while he lived. Now death has caught up with him. But take the lash anyway, and the reins, and I will dismount so I can fight." And Alcimedon swung into the fast war chariot and took the reins and lash in his hands. Automedon jumped off. Hector saw the move and said to Aeneas, who was at his side, "Aeneas, I've just spotted Achilles' horses coming into battle with a pair of weak drivers. I think I could take them, if you would help. Their drivers wouldn't stand up to men like us." Aeneas was willing, and the two went forward, shoulders hunched behind their shields, pounds of bronze welded to hardened leather. With them went Chromius and godlike Aretus, who fully expected they would kill the men and drive off the high-necked horses. But Automedon would extract blood for these childish hopes. He prayed to Lord Zeus, and felt a dark surge of power within him, then spoke quickly to his trusted driver. "Alcimedon, keep the horses close enough that I can feel their breath on my back. Hector won't stop until he mounts the chariot behind Achilles' horses, with us dead and the rest of the Argive army en route, or until he himself goes down in the front." And he called to both Ajaxes and to Menelaus, "Ajax, both of you, and Menelaus too, leave the body for the best men you have to defend it against the Trojan onslaught, and come help us out while we're still alive. Hector and Aeneas have weighed in here, the best Troy has. Well, it's in the gods' laps. I'll do what I can and leave the rest to Zeus." He balanced his long-shadowed spear and threw, hitting Aretus' shield, which did not stop the bronze point from penetrating all the way through and into his belly just below his belt. When a strong man swings a sharp axe onto a bull's neck just behind the horns and cuts through all the sinews there, the animal pitches forward as it falls. Aretus pitched forward and fell on his back, undone by the razor-sharp spear that stuck quivering in his entrails. Hector rifled his polished spear at Automedon, but Automedon saw it all the way and ducked, leaving it to punch into the ground and stand there trembling until Ares finally stilled its fury. They would have closed on each other with swords, but the two Ajaxes, responding to their comrade's call, stepped between them, sending cold chills through Hector and Aeneas and Chromius, who all withdrew, letting Aretus lie there, mangled and dead. As Automedon stripped him, he said with grim satisfaction, "This makes up for the death of Patroclus, though it is a lesser man I have killed." And he swung the bloody spoils into the chariot and mounted, his feet and arms smeared with gore like a lion that has just eaten a bull. The tense fight over Patroclus went on, made even more tense now by Athena, who stepped down from the sky sent by Zeus. Zeus sometimes sends a shimmering arc from the sky as a portent of war or of a cold rainstorm that brings men in from fields and vexes the flocks. Athena wrapped herself in an iridescent mist and entered the Greek throng, urging on each man, beginning with Atreus' son Menelaus, standing by his side and speaking to him in the guise of Phoenix and using his voice. "The shame and dishonor will be mostly yours, Menelaus, if Lord Achilles' faithful comrade is savaged by dogs under Ilion's walls. Hold your ground and urge on the army." Menelaus, good at the war cry, answered, "Phoenix, old sir! If only Athena would give me strength and shield me from spears, I would stand by Patroclus and protect him all day. I take his death hard, but Hector is on fire, just carving us up with his bronze. Zeus is giving him all the glory." Athena's eyes glinted in the sun, was glad that Menelaus had put her first in his prayers. She put power into his shoulders and knees, and into his breast the boldness of a horsefly that, however often it is flicked away from human flesh, persists in biting, for human blood is sweet. Menelaus felt that kind of boldness in his dark heart as he straddled Patroclus and threw his bright spear. There was among the Trojans a certain Podes, a son of Aetion, a rich, valiant man, whom Hector honored with a place at his table. Menelaus' spear hit him on the belt as he turned to run. The metal point went through, and he fell with a thud. Atreus' red-haired son dragged the body to the main group of Greeks. Then Apollo stood close to Hector, seeming to be Asius, son of Phaenops, a dear family friend who lived in Abydos. In his likeness the archer urged him on. "Hector, is there any Greek who will fear you now? Look how you lost your nerve before Menelaus, a well-known weakling. He's taken the corpse out from under your noses all by himself and is gone. And he's killed your true friend and great hero Podes, son of Aeson." A black cloud of grief enveloped Hector, and he strode forward in a blaze of bronze. At the same moment the son of Cronos took his aegis, a fringed glare in the sky, and wrapped Ida in clouds. He thundered the lightning and shook the aegis, giving victory to the routed the Greeks. Peneleos, Boeotian, bolted first. A spear grazed his shoulder as he faced the enemy, but the blade sliced through the bone. A lucky throw by Polydamas from close range. Leitus was next, nicked on the wrist by Hector, enough to make him quit the fight, seeing he couldn't grip a spear properly. This man was son of Alectryon. As he withdrew, wide-eyed and apprehensive, Hector chased him, and Idomeneus took a shot at the Trojan, hitting him on the breastplate right by the nipple, but the spear's shaft shattered in its socket. The Trojans cheered. Hector returned the favor, his javelin just missing Idomeneus as he stood in his chariot, but hitting Chaereneus, Meriones' charioteer and comrade from Lyctus. Idomeneus had set out from the ships on foot and would have handed the Trojans a great coup had not Chaereneus driven his fast horses by and given him some daylight. He saved the day, but lost his life to manslaughtering Hector, whose spear got him behind the jaw, under the ear, plowing out through his teeth and slicing his tongue lengthwise. He fell from the car and dropped the reins to the ground. Meriones bent over and scooped them up from the dirt and said to Idomeneus, "Lay on the lash until you get back to the ships. You know as well as I do, the Greeks are washed up." He spoke, and Idomeneus, in a panic now, lashed the maned horses back to the hollow ships. Not even Ajax and Menelaus failed to notice that Zeus had shifted the momentum to the Trojans. But Ajax turned to his companion and said, "Any fool can see that Father Zeus himself is helping the Trojans. Everything they throw hits home. It doesn't matter who throws it, brave man or coward. Zeus guides them all straight, but we can't hit anything but the ground. Let's try to come up with the best plan we can to haul the corpse out and build morale by getting ourselves back to our comrades. They must feel despair when they look this way. I doubt if they think Hector can be stopped before he lays his hands on our black sailing ships. If only one of our men could get a message through, fast, to Achilles. I don't think he's heard the bad news that his best friend is dead. But I can't see any Greek who could do that job. They're all lost in dark mist. Their horses, too. Father Zeus, deliver the Greeks from this dark. Make the sky clear. Allow us to see with our eyes. Destroy us in the light, since destroy us you will." He spoke, and the father had pity for his tears. Instantly he dispersed the darkness and mist, and the sun shone, and all the battle was clear. Then Ajax turned to Menelaus and said, "Menelaus, if you can spot Antilochus still alive, Nestor's son, have him go quickly to Achilles and tell him his best friend is dead." Menelaus, who was good at the war shout, couldn't argue with this, and started to leave. Very much like a lion that leaves a corral after it is tired of vexing the men and dogs who, standing guard all night, will not allow it to seize the herd's prime bull. Lusting for flesh, the lion charges, but gets nothing for it but a rain of javelins launched by bold hands and flaming torches that stop it in its tracks. At dawn, the lion goes off in a sullen mood. Menelaus was just as reluctant to leave Patroclus' body, afraid of a general rout that would leave him stranded behind enemy lines. He lingered to remind his comrades of their duty. "Both you, Ajaxes, and Meriones too. Everyone should keep in mind what a good man our Patroclus was, gentle and kind to all. when he was alive, and now death has taken him." Finally, Menelaus left, glancing every which way. An eagle whose eyesight is the keenest of all the birds in the sky can spot from high altitude a rabbit crouching under a leafy bush and, swooping down, catch it and instantly rip out its life. Yes, Menelaus, that's how your bright eyes swept everywhere through the allied troops, searching for Nestor's son. Was he still alive? And yes, spotted him on the battle's left, encouraging his men and urging them to fight. Menelaus made his way to his side and said, "I have bad news, Antilochus. You know some god has turned the tide against us. Well, now the best of the Achaeans is dead, Patroclus. God, that it were not true. Run to the ships and tell Achilles. If he acts quickly, he may still save the body, naked though. Hector has the armor." He spoke, and Antilochus was choked with horror. He was speechless, astounded, his eyes welled with tears, his voice stuck in his throat, but he did not disregard Menelaus' orders. He started to run, giving his armor to his charioteer who drove beside him. He left the battlefield on foot and in tears, with a grim report for Achilles, son of Peleus. Menelaus had no intention of staying to help the sore-pressed troops from Pylos, who already missed their commander Antilochus. He dispatched Thrasymedes in his place, and ran back to take his stand over Patroclus, next to the Ajaxes, to whom he said at once, "I've sent Antilochus there ahead to the ships to go to Achilles, but we can't count on Achilles coming any time soon. He may want Hector badly, but he can't fight the Trojans unarmed and naked. We have to come up with the best plan we can to get the body out and escape ourselves from this deafening battle without any casualties." It was big Ajax who came up with the plan. "Right, Menelaus. You and Meriones get the body up on your shoulders and carry it out. We'll be behind you, holding off the Trojans and Hector. We have the same name and the same heart, and we've stuck with each other in battle before." They got their arms around the corpse and raised it high off the ground. The Trojans shouted out when they saw the Greeks lift the body and charged. Hunting dogs after a wounded boar will run up in front of the hunters and for a while threaten to tear the boar apart. But when the boar pivots and thrusts its strength, the dogs quail and think back one by one. So too the Trojans, who would launch mass attacks, thrusting with swords and double-edged spears, but when the two Ajaxes wheeled and made a stand, they would all turn pale, not a single man willing to make a quick move and contend for the corpse. In this way, this little knot of Greeks did their best to carry Patroclus' body out of combat and back to their ribbed ships, while against them the battle strained and coiled. As wild as fire when it engulfs a city, suddenly, and it sets it aflame, and the houses shrivel in the heat, and the wind roars like thunder. So too, as they went on, the eternal din of horses, cars, and spearmen, noise like heat. Or think of a team of mules, matched in strength, dragging a load down a craggy mountain path, a beam, say, or a huge ship timber. Their spirits flag with the toil and sweat, but they push on. So these two Greeks pushed on with the corpse, and the two Ajaxes held the enemy off. A wooded ridge that lies across a plain will check the cruel currents of swollen rivers, turning them back to spread over the plain, and the floods, though strong, never break through. So the two Ajaxes contained the Trojans' offensive push. But the Trojans kept coming, and two among them especially, Aeneas, Anchises' son, and glorious Hector. A cloud of starlings or jackdaws will loop around, shrieking doom when they see ahead of them a falcon, which brings death to smaller birds. So too, before Aeneas and Hector, the Greeks ran shrieking, as if it were the end of the world. The trench was littered with their beautiful discarded weapons. but there was no armistice. And that is episode, or that was book 17, continuing the episode now. So, I mean, I say wow every time, but each one of these books has something really phenomenal about it. In this one, the thing that stands out the most to me is Patroclus is dead, right? And everyone else bands together to get him out of there. They all team up, they fight off the Greeks fight off the Trojans as much as they can, going back and forth until finally the two Ajaxes, who have the same name, who are the same blood, lock shields together and hold the rear guard and fight off all the Trojans, just the two of them, so that Menelaus and Meriones, I think it was, can pick up the body of Patroclus just to get him back. His body has been stripped naked of the armor, and they're just trying to get him back. Now, I mentioned a story once before, which is really relevant now, which is there was an interview, I forget who was interviewing exactly the person, but there was a combat veteran who, with his fellow soldiers, fought the enemy to basically did this. They fought over the dead bodies of their fallen comrades. And it was heavy fighting. I think that some of them even died doing this. And there's a lot of dead bodies on this battlefield. And the journalist interviewing the veteran asked, why did you fight so hard? I mean, yeah, okay, but he's dead. Why'd you fight so hard for this? And there was a pause, and the combat veteran just said, they were ours. And these guys, Patroclus came in because he had compassion for all of them. Achilles couldn't get around his rage, and Patroclus is like, look, these are my friends. We gotta go do this. Let me go. And he went and he killed a ton of people. He almost saved the day. He kind of did save the day. He pushed the Trojans back from the ships. And then he tried to take Troy. He ran up the sloping walls and was flicked off by Apollo. And then he was killed. He's stabbed in the back by a kid and then taken out completely by Hector. And that meant a lot to the other guys. They knew him. They'd been there for years. This is Patroclus. They said he was gentle and kind and strong. It's really cool when you find a person who's kind and strong, don't you think? I think that I think a lot of people have a hard time keeping both of those two things together, being strong and kind. But apparently Patroclus was able to do that. One of the things we know about Patroclus beforehand was that he was patching up a guy in the back lines before, and his heart compelled him to go out and fight, to save his friends. And they fought like hell to get his body back. And the two Ajaxes bring it. That's just such a great moment where the two of those guys are like, all right, let's do it again. So good. But yeah, there's a lot of that. Now, one of the other things to bring up, I'll say this before we get into the chat. Someone might be wondering, why does Zeus kind of turn his nose up at Hector when Hector puts on the armor of Achilles? Aren't people taking everybody's armor left and right here? What's so special about that? Well, on the one hand, that armor was given to Peleus by the gods, who then he gave to his son. But what do we do with that armor? We don't keep that. We don't use that. We put that in the temple, right? And Hector doesn't take it and put it on an altar and burn it or anything like that. He's like, I'm going to wear this stuff. And Zeus is like, all right, let's make it fit. And he's just like, death is real close to you, buddy. So, and it's really sad. We get that heartbreaking moment where it says, Achilles doesn't know this greatest evil, that his dearest friend is dead. His mom didn't tell him. His mom could have told him, but she didn't. She spared her son that pain. Really interesting. There's all these emotional things in here. Like, I think one of the things that I have found is that a lot of people have a hard time with classics like Shakespeare or Homer, and because they don't it's harder sometimes to see the emotional beats in it, where it's like a lot of time it just seems like chess piece storytelling. Like, okay, Hamlet finds out this and he goes over there, and Romeo and Juliet meet, and then they go apart, and then they come back together, and they leave again, and I guess they love each other. And it's like, no, this is deeply a deeply emotionally driven story. There's this circumstance of war going on, but what Achilles is thinking about doing with his life, whether he's going to stay and fight or if he's going to go get himself a wife, or Patroclus, his heart going out to people, or Hector telling everyone, fight for the women and children of Troy. This is why this story has lasted forever. And it's one reason why I'm doing this series, is because, well, it's my favorite book, obviously, but, trying to, it's like when you love something, you want to tell other people about it and be like, hey, this is why I like it so much. And this story is like, it's so detailed and nuanced and clever with how it builds the action up and how the violence is reaching up to heaven, and how Achilles kind of represents like the middle world between mortal and immortal. And now finally, it's like you've got the idea of horrible war and glorious war, and Achilles is more the glorious side. He hasn't lost anything, and now his best friend is dead, and all these guys who have been fighting the horrible thing there's still these moments of heroism, and it's like both of these two ideas are fighting each other constantly. That's what the war is kind of in a weird way about, like the book is partially about. So I hope that if any of you have had a difficult time with the classics before, that you are getting something out of this series. But anyway, with that, I'm going to go over into the chat, one of my favorite things. Oh, look, we have an active chat again. Thank you so much for being active in the chat. I do enjoy these moments greatly. So let's see what we've got here. Stacy says, if the war was about Helen 10 years ago, I have a feeling it's going to be about Patroclus in this episode. Ooh, yes, so setting us up. Yeah, at this point, no one's talking about Helen. Well, except Menelaus. At the beginning, he said, Patroclus fought for my honor. Menelaus hasn't lost focus of everybody's really here because Paris stole my wife. Like that's really where it starts for him. And that's one of the things that's really nice about Menelaus is he's very aware and very grateful and almost a little ashamed of everything that's going on. Like remember ages ago when Paris and Menelaus had that fight, and he was like, who will fight Paris, to end the war? And Menelaus is like, this is why we're here. It's me. All right, I'll kill you. And I think Menelaus destroying Euphorbus at the beginning, like, get out of here, kid, you got lucky. And Euphorbus like, no, I'm gonna fight you. And then Menelaus killing him. Anyway, sorry, continuing the chat. Joe says, hello, Joe. Thank you for being here again. Jess says, Jess, this is Jess Paul, says, finally made it. Jess Paul, by the way, this is Jess Paul. She has a wonderful YouTube channel. She uploads at least once a week, from what I remember. She does a live thing on Fridays, and she does wonderful content, and she's one of the most talented, driven, awesome people I've ever met in my life. So I encourage you to check out her YouTube channel. It's totally different from what I do over here, but she's the best. So anyway, so Joe says, yay, Jess. Yes, very well. Yes, of course. Stacy says, hi, Jess. Oh, I see you all know Jess. Very good. Stacy says, Menelaus, why am I talking to myself? LOL. Yep. So there's I think a little bit of humor in there. All right, so Stacy says, I find it odd that both Patroclus and Hector fit Achilles' armor. Enter Zeus, but he didn't help it fit Patroclus. Patroclus, it fit. Yeah, so that is kind of an interesting thing, how Achilles' armor just naturally fits Patroclus, but Zeus had to make it fit Hector. I wonder if there's I bet there's a deeper meaning to that, because how did Patroclus get killed? Luck. Basically Apollo cheated, and then Euphorbus that. So Hector didn't beat Patroclus in a fair fight, and there's this whole thing where Achilles is the best. And even in this book, they say, like, Telamonian Ajax was the greatest Greek ever, except for Achilles. And we've had books before where Ajax and Hector have fought all the time, and they're, like, pretty equally matched, but they're both kind of scared of each other. So we know that, like, Achilles is better than Hector at fighting. So it's interesting that the armor wouldn't fit. So yeah, very, very clever there. I think there's a deeper meaning to that. Let's see. Joe says, "Don't spear and drive." Yes, I agree. Don't do that. That's interesting to see Zeus take pity on an animal. Yeah, the two immortal horses of Peleus weeping for Patroclus and Zeus taking pity on them is a very tender moment. That reminds me of a story that I'm going to tell you right now, which is Audie Murphy, who I've mentioned several times on this show, a great Texan, a great American hero, who's the most decorated soldier of World War II. He was, one time when he was in Anzio, after the invasion of, like, part of the invasion of southern France. He's, like, in Italy, all right, I think. And he fights the Germans. All right, so Audie Murphy had 240 confirmed kills. All right, think about that for a second. 240 confirmed as an infantry guy. All right, like, you hear about snipers sometimes, it's like, yeah, okay, that makes a little bit more sense, but like an infantry guy doing that is insane. And there's a story about how there were some horses in Anzio, where they were, that were killed. And all of them had gotten kind of used to seeing people die. But he and a couple of the other Americans were dispatched to bury these horses because of the smell. And he said they had all kind of gotten used to people dying a little bit, but there was something about seeing those horses dead that shook all of them. Like, these battle-hardened guys who, you know, were kind of used to seeing their friends die almost. Like, for some reason, seeing those horses and digging those graves for them left a deep mark on their souls. So, I don't know. I think people like horses. But yeah. Okay, so Bubba the Musician says the tongues really get cut up in the story. Yes. Yeah, what a nasty death that was. The spear smashing the teeth, splitting the tongue. It's like, nasty. But also pretty, pretty accurate. That can happen. Joe says lots of extra divine interferences in this one. Yeah, it's kind of annoying almost, It's like, can the gods just get out of this and let the heroes fight? Let's see. So Joe says, so this was all because Patroclus was close with Achilles. Man, this really shows what a superstar Achilles was. Yeah. Yeah, actually. They let some people stay back after, like, some bodies they leave out there, but they're like, this was Achilles' best friend. And they also liked him. But yeah, it's really something to think about. All right, so Stacy with our final comment here says, even when he's pouting and not helping them on the battlefield. Yeah, so even when Achilles isn't helping, everybody still respects the living daylights out of him, and they're like, would be better if we died than let his buddy stay here, than leave his body here. And it's just that moment when the Greeks lift up Patroclus's body to get him out of there. They lift him up, and the Trojans are like, no, and they go for him, and the two Ajaxes, it's like, oh my gosh. Talk about, that's some love right there. I can't. All right. So Gorham Darth Cal. Hey, Gorham Darth Cal's here. Welcome. All right, said, you should make a top 10 list of your favorite kills, deaths in this book. Oh, well, you know what? I actually should. I would say, although the death of Patroclus is really sad to me, that's really high up there. Just the short back and forth he has with Hector at the end there, when Hector's like, you thought you could, like, sack my city and take our women as slaves, but they're defended by me, Hector. I am the one who protects them. That whole thing is like, Hector, you're so cool. And then Patroclus being like, you will die soon, it's like, I see death behind your shoulder. It's like, it's such a great It's such a good scene. But there is still more to come. Perhaps more dramatic and intense. So, with that, Gorham Darth Cowl, yeah, you know what? You come up with a bunch of good ideas. You asked me before, like, who I would cast in a movie, and you know what? I've been thinking about that a lot more, and I think I'm going to do a whole, like, bonus episode on if I made Iliad into a movie, what would it be like? But I'll just tell you right now, one of the only people I can think of, I've been having a really hard time casting this in my mind, and at the moment I'm like, you know who would be really great is Robert Downey Jr. as Odysseus. But I'm just saying that because, you know, Iron Man and Odysseus are the same person, so pretty much. But yeah, I think that'd be a good one. I mean, Morgan Freeman would be a great old Nestor, but that's just because, you know, he's good at playing old wise people. So yeah, I guess that would work. Shia LaBeouf was in Fury, and he was great in that, so I feel like he'd be someone good in this. I can't figure out who I would have as Diomedes, or a bunch of these guys, honestly. But I know I want Jason Isaacs to be someone, probably Menelaus. So Menelaus probably Menelaus. That would be good. Anyhow, all right. Well, thank you very much for joining me for this episode 17. Thank you for being a loyal, I'll just generously say, fan base. But we didn't have an episode last Thursday, so thank you for showing up like you always do. And if you're watching this and it isn't live, thank you for making it this far. I hope you make it to the end, and I hope that you're getting something wonderful out of this series. I certainly am having a fantastic time. Hope you've had a nice drink, and I hope that the rest of your evening and this week is excellent. And I also hope to see you this Thursday at the same time, 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time, with me, Peter, for Peter Presents. All right, good night.